Welcome to the Biotech Startups podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, John Chi. In our last episode, we spoke with Kate Yen about her passion for science, her transition from academia to industry, and to the key experiences that shaped her approach to drug discovery. If you missed it, be sure to go back and listen to part 1. In part 2, Kate takes us through her leadership journey at Agios, where she played a pivotal role in advancing a novel cancer therapy through clinical trials. We'll hear about the challenges of taking a drug from discovery to FDA approval, what it's like to navigate the biotech startup landscape, and how she built Auron Therapeutics from the ground up. She also shares insights on managing lean operations, forging strategic partnerships with Big Pharma, and the importance of grit in biotech entrepreneurship. Without further ado, let's dive into part 2 of the Biotech Startups podcast.
Absolutely. And, from there, I know you were promoted to director of biology. Can you talk, how did your kind of responsibilities change when you transitioned into that role?
Yeah. So, that was really leading more of a function when I was doing the in vivo stuff, applying to multiple projects and, helping out from multiple projects. Whereas when I went in and led the IDH team, that was really focused specifically only on that one program. And really, what are the biomarkers and the mechanism of how that mutant gene is driving cancer and how we're going to be able to track that in the clinic. And we had been developing a drug. We had a whole team that was doing the drug discovery for those to develop small molecules against that mutation. But you can have the best drug in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, it's not going to help you, right?
Yep.
And so, the mechanism is what we needed to understand, and that was what my job was. And it was like probably the experience of a lifetime. I got to understand a target from early discovery of the gene and, okay, it's playing a role in cancer, and what that gene initially, we knew what it did. And then really, really digging deep and really getting a firm mechanistic understanding of how that mutation is really contributing overall to cancer. And then going into the clinic and getting drugs approved off of that. So I got to see and lead a program from target identification all the way through phase 3 approvals of drugs for patients. And that was my dream job, right? To take something from basic science to translation. And I got to meet patients that took the drug. It was like unbelievably moving and so exciting. And you really can't recreate that event, but, again, I think I just was at the right place at the right time. And the exciting science that came along with it really was what motivated me to keep going.
That's so cool. And again, kind of like similar when you're at Merck, you're just like a rare opportunity to just be this sponge. And then now you're like leading the thing. Can you talk a little bit about, like, I'm going to imagine, now that you're leading this, you are overseeing and managing like people from all, like, you are the one managing these kind of diverse Avengers like consortium. How did you approach that management and leadership, role?
Yeah.
Like, and keeping them like, a very diverse group of people all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, no, I think so myself and this other woman who's a chemist, she and I ran the program together. And, I think both of us have a very similar work style. It's like no nonsense, like this is what we need to get done. How are we going to get this done? Let's work through it together, and just being very transparent and communicative with everybody. Again, like I don't want to torture people. I have empathy. We'll have things that come up and down, and people know things and don't know things. If they don't know things, it's okay. Let's find out the answer. And so, really just imparting all of that wisdom that I'd gotten through my training and my career, and using that to, bring people together so that we could drive the program forward.
Very cool. And so, we touched on the kind of like the in vivo kind of portion of the kind of the cycle. Can you talk a little bit about getting into the clinic? Like, that's another deep end, probably the deepest of deep ends.
Yes.
How did you learn the ropes there?
Yeah, again, we had, so as we were moving into the clinic, my team, myself and my team, were the ones who understood the deep biology of the program. And so when we were writing the phase 1 protocols for the trial, and the exploratory endpoints and the biomarker endpoints that we were going to be collecting, they wanted me and my team to really have input into that, because they wanted to be able to understand very quickly, is the drug working in patients? And so that's how I got sort of pulled in as a clinical scientist into following the drug. And David, I think Shankai, the CEO at the time, he is a big proponent of taking someone and making sure the science follows the drug into the clinic, so it doesn't go over a wall, over a cliff, and then the rest of the scientists never see it again. It becomes a clinical asset, and it's, never the twain shall meet again. That's not how he likes to operate, and I agree with them. And Sam Agresta, who was running the trials, brought me along, and I got to learn all of the pieces of how a clinical trial's run. And that was like another whole learning experience.
Yeah.
That was completely crazy. I didn't see any of that at Merck, though. Even though that's happening, you were too siloed to ever be part of that team. So again, I got to see the build of the clinical organization, and then I got to be part of it, which was really, really exciting.
That's so cool. And I guess, quick question, how common is it to just toss it over the wall? Is that the status quo? Is literally just, all right, here you go, clinical team.
In big pharma, it does happen that way. They often just, they turn it over to a translational team where it becomes much more biomarker and like assay development, as opposed to the mechanism studies. In biotech, it's not as much because they just don't have the resources to have a whole group. You kind of have to do both. But it's more common than you think. And so I have been very purposeful in Auron, my company now, what we call biology. From day one, it's translational biology. We don't call it like discovery biology. It's translational biology from day one, because I think that the biology, as I said, always runs. It's preclinical and clinical, but it always runs along the drug discovery aspect in parallel. And it needs to continue as you get into the clinic. And you want the team of people that understand the biology the best to be informing the physicians about how to use the drug.
It makes a lot of sense. Like it makes a ton of sense. Intuitively, it's just like, yeah, like why would someone who has been, this is their like baby for many, many years, only to just like, here you go, someone who has
no idea.
Like, yeah, good luck. You're just like, good luck. It just doesn't, that aspect is like, it's like kind of, why? And, as you were having this baptism of fire in like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, can you talk a little bit about like maybe what were some like challenges and triumphs as you're working through the clinic?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges is, the drug works by a different mechanism than most cancer drugs that are being developed. Most cancer drugs cause or trying to kill cancer cells. And obviously you want to, shrink someone's tumor. But this mechanism against the IDH inhibitors, it actually causes tumor cells to terminally differentiate. So most tumor cells are more in a stem state, and then you treat them, and then you actually promote differentiation of those cells out of that stem state into a mature state, and then they stop dividing and proliferating. And that mechanism had been at the time proven to work for a different form of leukemia, but it had never really been proven to work in the context of solid tumors. And so we had to really understand that biology and build assays and biomarkers and experiments so that we could prove that was how it was working in the clinic. And so we had to teach the physicians about what they were looking at. And we also had to talk with the FDA and really work hand in hand with them about the mechanism to help us move those drugs through the development process.
So what I'm hearing is that you did the clinic on hard mode, like ultra hard mode, where there was like minimal precedent, like where like let's do this from scratch, where we need to like get you up to speed, regulator and physicians, of this like different approach. That's incredible. And for anyone who's out there, maybe this is their first go, like getting into the clinic, what are some like common pitfalls to avoid?
I think a lot of people sometimes will, I think often people just think they know what they're doing and they put together protocols and they don't partner with the FDA. I think David was a big proponent, and I, that way at my company, a big proponent of, having interactions with the FDA, telling them what you're doing, talking to them, getting their advice about how to, go about setting up the trials in the most efficient manner. I think that's one big important aspect. And the other is, thinking about biomarkers and exploratory endpoints that you can build into the trial so that you can actually track the biology.
It makes a lot of sense. And I would imagine, if I think of it from like first principles, like the FDA wants to make this thing work.
No one has any reason to make it fail.
They don't want to fail you. So it's like, that makes like rational sense. They're like, hey, help me. Like, it's kind of like, they're in the same boat, even though they are kind of like the gatekeeper of it all, but they want you to get through it if you can. Which makes a lot of sense. And it sounds overly simplistic when I say it, but it's like, obviously it's a very, complex endeavor.
Their gatekeeping is to make sure that it's safe, right? You don't want to hurt anybody in the process of testing something. And in order to be able to show that you have benefit and not hurt somebody, you have to understand the biology. And so working in partnership with them to safeguard against all of those aspects is the best path forward, I think.
Absolutely. And, you talked about like learning the business side while you're at Agios. Can you talk about how do you keep it within budget? Because all I hear now is that clinical trials are ungodly sums of money and are never run on budget. How did you keep it within budget?
I think that is very challenging, but clinical trials are super expensive. You just have to think smart and have interesting and smart designs. And again, I hate to harp on it, but if you understand the biology as you go in and you build assays so that you can see, is it really working? You can tell quickly if the drug is working or not. And biomarkers and patient stratification and understanding what types of patients you need to start with your drug, that tells you if it's going to have legs or not. And, you can make decisions quickly if it's not worthwhile to keep pursuing, or if it means you want to actually spend more money and go faster. And those are decisions that you need something to guide you along the way, and the science is what does that. Very cool.
I'm frankly really jealous that you had this opportunity to do this. But as I'm hearing it, I'm like, dang, if I could be a fly on the wall and just like see all this all the way through. Because I think it's a really rare opportunity. And I haven't heard many stories like this where you can go from soup to nuts. I guess question about when you were there, I believe you guys IPO'd during your tenure there.
Yes.
How was that transition from private company to publicly traded company?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, for us and the team and the weeds, it wasn't as visible to me, that transition from a business perspective. We were kind of sheltered from that. I'm sure from understanding what that means now, I'm sure the leadership team was like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh,
They did a good job,
um,
it sounds like then. If they were able to
yeah,
keep like,
they did.
like
They
hair on
did.
fire, but you guys were
Yes.
like, seems fun.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think the biggest thing is like, we just had to be very careful about what we were saying and, clinical data, making sure someone didn't slip and say something that they couldn't say. And, but, they kept a good handle on it. And, yeah, they ran it well. I know must have been challenging for them, but I didn't feel it quite as much.
Yeah, 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 totally, totally. Um, and as you're wrapping up your time there, when did you know it was time to leave? And when did you know it was like you are going to do your own entrepreneurial venture?
So it's a fun story. I was in the phase 1 trials and we got our drugs approved on the phase 1 data, which was super exciting. And then I was in the clinical group and I was now leading the global phase 3 trial for full approval. And David, the CEO of Shanghai, came up to me and he said, "Kate, what are you doing?" He's like, "You can't run phase 3 trials anymore. Like this isn't like your sweet spot."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
phase 3 trials are very operational and big, but I got to learn all of clinical development, all the aspects that go into clinical development and how you write a trial and the biostats and the operations and all of that piece. And I said, well, I don't know. And I was truly looking at that point to try and figure out. And I was very intrigued by the science of promoting differentiation to enable therapies for cancer and to go about it differently than the standard cytotoxic approach. But I couldn't find any companies that were doing that research. And I was looking, and David said to me, being David, he said, "Well, why don't you just start your own company?" And I
It doesn't matter if I like that.
yeah,
Easy,
he
just
is pretty much like that.
Yeah.
And I thought he was completely crazy. I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like it just seems so foreign. And then he said, "No, I'm serious. You should think about it." And I kind of noodled about it, and he was noodling in the back of my head for a while. And I started to think a little bit, well, what would I do and how would I put this together? And I sort of talked to him a little bit about it. And then I kind of built out a little bit. I talked to some friends. Built out a little bit of a business idea. And then David connected me to Wilmer Hale, the corporate attorneys, and they incorporated me. And I don't know, since that, I've just been putting one foot in front of the other. And here we are today.
That's amazing. And again, it's kind of like is what we're talking about. It's like we're all just figuring it out and just like a day at a time. That's like really what it is. And so now you're officially incorporated. And how did you, I guess the first, your co-founders, your early days, your early team, how did you guys come together?
Yeah. So my 3 co-founders, so Matt Vanderheiden, Ross Levine, and Eitan Stein, I worked with all 3 of them at Agios on the IDH development. And so they were also, physician scientists who understand that, mechanism is really cool. And I wanted to build a company. I said, "Would you be willing to, come with me and do this?" And they're like, "Sure, let's try. If you can do it, like go for it."
Yeah. Yeah.
So we incorporated with them as the co-founders. I had nothing. It was just me in my kitchen. And I went out to friends and family and I shared them with my idea about what I wanted to do. And I raised about $1.5 million from friends and family to get some initial science going. And I hired Laura Antipov, who has been with me since the beginning as a consultant initially. And she and I basically took that money and started to do some experiments at CROs. I knew how to work through CROs. I knew how to do collaborations with labs. So I found labs that might be interested in working with us. And we also did a collaboration with a company that does a lot of computational biology. And so with them, we just kind of started to build a little bit of momentum around some initial targets that we wanted to study. And from there, we've expanded the company. I was able to convince proper venture capitalists, that we actually had built something, and we did our first seed financing with venture in December of 2020.
That's so cool to hear that origin story, because I think, especially being in like the San Francisco like Bay Area, where it's like there's like venture capital just like overflowing out of this area, and there's like a very kind of like prescriptive way that like of like, this is how you run a biotech company.
Yes.
Here's the playbook. Here's how you finance it. Here's who you hire. It's kind of like very, whereas I love to hear that it was just like, for you, like you raised the friends and family round and you ran it lean. Like, that you can run it lean and not have to do like the kind of the standard playbook. Which is refreshing to hear.
Yeah. The venture capitalists, when I was first pitching to them, they kind of looked at me like I had three heads. They were like, what? What are you doing? How did you do that?
Yeah. I love that. Like, I love that, because I think that's, it's kind of that out of the box thinking. And also it sounds like every experience, everything I'm hearing was kind of like accretive. You were just like, I know how to do this. Like, I know how to like, and you had all these puzzle pieces and you like stitched it together.
Yes.
So I love to hear that. And, and the humble beginnings, it's like you're like in your kitchen. Like it really is like that. It really is like, because I remember when I was first starting Exceeder, I was at a dining room table.
Exactly.
I was just like at a dining room table. I was like, all right, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm just like, like figure this thing out. And so, as in the very, I guess I have a question. When you were just like doing the external collaborations and working with CROs, was there a point in time where you're like, we need to, bring things in house? Was that around like when the venture capital came in, or are you guys still running super lean in that way?
Yeah, no, we've been running very lean. We didn't start our own labs till about maybe a little over 2 years ago, maybe just 2 years ago. We ran through all the different CROs, and I think it's a lot easier now. I mean, the CROs are pretty well established, and there's CROs all over the place that you can gain access to. And I think we started to hire people in that could manage the CROs to do the work we needed to. So I'm a biologist by training, obviously. And then I hired as a CSO a chemist. So Dave joined us, and he's got a lot of tons of experience developing drugs. And I think between Dave and myself, like we synergize with each other in our expertise, right? And so that is really a great way to kind of push things forward. We build out the biology and very lean chemistry teams, and we use CROs to really keep the costs down as much as possible. And then when we wanted to do more bespoke kind of tailored experiments, that's when we got some labs. But we didn't go and hire or find a lab space and that has 30,000 square feet and offices and build the whole thing. We actually work through a co-op lab shares, which is really great. And, I don't have to pay overhead for all the instruments. I don't have to pay for a lab manager. I don't have to deal with all that. We have a few benches and our equipment that we need. But then we just share the space, and we have kept it as lean as humanly possible.
I absolutely love that. Like, I love that, because I think I was talking about the kind of like the prescriptive nature of like how to run a biotech. It's like, it brings down the activation energy, right? There's there's great science to be had and to come to life. Yes. And you don't need to have like this blockbuster check to even get started.
No, you don't. You don't. You don't.
And that's the, my wife's in software, and like, obviously software is like capital light and they're very iterative, but like your approach sounds a little bit like about how like, everything that Y Combinator talks about, just like test it, keep it lean, keep the overhead like as low as possible so you can stay nimble.
Yes, exactly.
and not have this massive lease that you like, oh, what am I gonna do with all this space? I now am like stuck with this.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to sort of my empathy and that how my guiding principles of, I don't want to hire 70 people that I need to lay off because things can go well, right? I also don't think you need a ton of people to do this. You need the right people to do it. And you need the right team and the right environment to come together and be willing to be entrepreneurial, vulnerable, excited, push forward, all of those things. And I want to just utilize that synergy rather than wasting money on things. I put it to your point, put it to use and put it to fund the science so that you can actually move quick.
Absolutely. And I think it's super painful to see in the news where there's like more layoffs, more layoffs, more layoffs, more layoffs. And you're like, it's like those are people like who have like families and like bills to pay. And I always ask myself, like, there's got to be like a more sustainable way to do this.
Yeah.
Like, does it really have to be like where it's just like, just kind of like boom bust? Can we do it where it's just like exactly what you said, like kind of like more like piece by piece, like bring in the right people, not just necessarily like, hiring for like a vanity headcount.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I always see that everybody's like, oh, you hired this or that, or you brought in this check size. And I'm like, okay, it's kind of noise to me. I got to get these experiments done. Got to keep pushing forward to get to the clinic.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. And so, you guys, it sounds like you have your core team, your co-founders, you have your kind of like, okay, we have these kind of the stakeholders in place. Can you talk a little bit about Auron's maybe let's talk about the market first.
Yeah.
And how does Auron, your technology and your approach, disrupt the status quo out there in the market?
Yeah. So we built the company was founded on the principle that, cancer, we focus initially on cancer, but that cancer cells are hijacking normal developmental biology pathways in order to promote tumorigenesis. And to me, it's always been frustrating when you want to try and figure out why a cancer cell is a cancer cell. People tend to take one cancer cell from one cell line and compare it to another cancer cell that's a cancer cell, that's a different genetic mutation, and then they figure out what's different, and then they try to build biology on that. And to me, I'm like, I don't understand that. You want to compare to normal, right? Not another weird cancer cell.
Makes sense.
Right. And so we have spent time to build this platform that we have built an atlas of normal human development, a single cell atlas of normal development that starts from very early stem cells all the way through terminally differentiated cell states. And that atlas, we use it as a reference, and we can map tumor cells to it and understand exactly where they're blocked in the differentiation cascade. And then once they're mapped, we can do the computational comparison between tumor and a normal cell state matched normal tissue. And then we can have a clear understanding of what pathways are disrupted in the tumor, what developmental pathways are being hijacked by the tumor compared to the normal cells, and then target those to push differentiation and generate novel therapies. And so that's what we've done. I think, it's a little bit of a different approach than most people take. But the technology and the single cell RNA-seq and omic analyses and AI and machine learning tools that have become available now lately, we've really capitalized. And so I think the sweet sauce of our company is that platform that we've built, but it's really that interface between computational machine learning, biology, and molecular biology, basic biology that is coming together to really advance programs. And now it's really exciting, our lead program that we're taking into the clinic. There's lots of data now that's supporting, all disease areas, multiple disease areas are hijacking developmental biology pathways. It's not just cancer. And so there's an utility to potentially use this platform much more broadly than oncology.
So cool. And I guess like question on AI ML in biology. I know there's like a lot of talk about it.
Yes.
And you have your hands on it. Like, do you see in your like day to day where there's like, oh, this is like AI ML really moving the needle, like, or is it more of just like, what is almost overly grandiose in its promises?
Yeah, I mean, I think people use it as a buzzword all the time, and fine if you need to say what you need to say, but like we we are actively using it because, these large omic data sets, they're just too big to process, right? You can't do it by yourself, right? And so we have our computational team that really reduces it to practice. And so we use these large omic data sets, and we've used it to make this atlas, and then we've developed specific machine learning algorithms that allow us to map the tumors to the atlas, and then other machine learning algorithms that allow us to define what genes are driving the differential expression between the tumor and normal. And so we have a very specific application. We're not trying to apply AI machine learning to everything. We're really asking a very specific question as how developmental biology pathways are being co-opted by disease. And then we apply machine learning technology to answer that question.
Very cool. Yeah, every time I'm like on like the internet, I'm just like, and here too, like my you couldn't go a block without overhearing like the promises of AI, and I was just like getting coffee. I was like,
yes,
this is where am I? This, I was just trying to get a coffee, but there's like 3 different like AI ML conversations like going. I'm like, what is real and what isn't? And for me, like I care most about like and I'm sure, AI ML can be used in a bunch of different applications, but what I care most about is like, does it actually move the needle?
Yes.
In like, life science. And I'd love to hear that you're like, yes, like for your case, it is, which is awesome to hear.
Yeah.
And so, you talked about your origin platform, you talked about your pipeline development, and I know, there, when it comes to like business models, you're either bucketed into platform company or like you're developing this candidate to push through into the clinic in your pipeline. Can you talk a little bit about, and it seems like you're doing both. And can you talk a little bit about, in years past, their platforms were all the rage. And then now it feels like it's kind of like shifted in the other direction.
All the rage. Yeah,
it's not all the rage anymore.
Yes.
Can you talk a little about like why does it like oscillate? And honestly, what's their opinions on both approaches?
Yeah, I think it oscillates a little bit around the markets, right? I think platforms are kind of big and visionary, right? And we can do everything with them. And, at the end of the day, you need to get a return for your investment, which is being able to sell a drug, right? And so that's why you need the pipeline, and you get it into the clinic and you can get it approved and move forward. So I think the markets being what they are today, and investors are looking for sure bets that they have something that is moving along and can get them to that return in their investment. When things are flowing and money is flowing, I think people are more willing to take a lot more risk and be creative about what the platforms are. Again, I think I'm not trying to blow smoke with people about our platform. I've just built this tool to help me understand the biology so that we can move it into making a drug, because I too want to get to a drug for the return on investment, yes, but really ultimately for patients, right? I want to provide better therapies. Like, I'm tired of seeing people and friends and family and hearing awful stories about people taking rat poison, and it's just terrible, right? And there has to be a better way to do this. And so I think, I think you need both. I think the platform should set as the core of your company and sort of what you're doing. But at the end of the day, you want to make something that is marketable for patients and for investors.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's kind of this thing like where if it can just be the thing that is like generating your candidates, like awesome. Because I think, and you I guess that's a question for you. Like now you're talking about how this atlas can be applied outside of oncology. Does that mean, are you looking into expand outside of oncology, or is this something where the platform, you're going to be opening it up to external collaboration as well?
Yeah, so we are actually looking to expand outside of oncology. Our lead asset, there is potential opportunity for that outside of oncology, and we're actively exploring that right now. I do think it also opens up potential partnership collaborations with pharma, and we're talking to pharma partners about that as well. Our platform could be useful to them for disease areas that they're interested in, and thinking about approaching, and can we help them think about good targets or better biomarkers, and using our platform to do that. We're totally open for that. I think there's lots of different opportunity to grow the platform as well. We're small and nimble. We're trying to stay focused. Oncology is our bread and butter right now. But we are actually actively exploring inflammation and autoimmune disease right now. And those two biologies are also very linked with each other. In cancer, there's inflammation that causes cancer that can affect inflammation status too. And so, it's not a big leap to think that there'd be synergies there.
Absolutely. And, when it comes to working with, pharma partners on utilizing your platform, I'm thinking about it like you navigated the academic part collaboration, you navigated the CRO collaboration. Now in comes a new entrant, big pharma.
Yeah.
Like how's that? Like, how did you build that muscle?
Yeah, that goes back to Agios days. So when we first, we did the initial financing, the $30 million that they raised through venture, but then we got a partnership with Celgene. And so I worked with Celgene both on the research side. For the lead program, I was the one going in front of all their committees and things, telling them the science, because we had a financial partnership with them. And then when we got into the clinic, I was also working with them as we were co-developing the drugs. So I got a lot of experience in that aspect, and then also reaching back to my days at Merck, I saw that as well. So I know how pharma works. So that also, to your point earlier, you kind of figure out what the other people need, what they're trying to get at, and what you need and how can you work together. Big pharma and biotech have a lot of overlapping, end game that they want to get to. They have different ways of doing it and individual needs, but there's a lot of ways that they can synergize and work well together. You just got to get the lawyers out of the way.
Yeah. That's for sure. Can you talk a little bit about like what is the unique individual need of big pharma when you're entering that like conversation? Like what is it that they're optimizing for? Obviously there's commonalities, but like what is that? What is the differentiating like priorities for them?
They're much more conservative, I would say, than biotech, because like you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of manage that, right? And they can be conservative because they have the money to do things conservatively, right? Whereas I think biotech, you have to be scrappy, and how to navigate that can sometimes be challenging.
Absolutely. And I'm going to imagine there's probably a ton of like stakeholders that you have to socialize.
Yeah. It's a whole different approval process that you have to get through, for sure. That is a big problem.
And so like, I'm just very curious is like who, if you are, like if we say like, if you're trying to secure this partnership to utilize the Origin platform, who's like the first person you reach out to like at like big pharma? Is it like, is there a specific person? And then I guess curiously, like who else do you need to bring into the conversation?
So that I think, as I've learned along the way, you actually need to reach out to the scientists. You need access to the scientists. You need to get an internal champion of the science and your approach and what you're doing to be the person fighting for you internal to the big organization. The business people that layer on top, look, they're not scientists. They can't say, is this going to be a good business opportunity or not? They can take that recommendation from the scientists, the science team. So I think you really need to find that internal champion and really foster those relationships and show them all the opportunity that you bring forward, and then have them be the ones fighting for you with the business team.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like, who knows the intricacies and the inner workings better than the person who's running, who's at the bench? Like, who knows this?
Exactly.
That makes total sense. And, as you're like thinking about, company building for Auron, it sounds like you guys are like slow and steady wins the race kind of. And we touched on it kind of already, kind of like what are the cultural North Stars, but what is the cultural North Star for you guys at Auron, and like any tips on like hiring and retaining great talent?
Yeah, I think for me, I think being transparent with the company, everybody's kind of working together. Like if I had my druthers in the world, I wouldn't have a hierarchy and titles. It would just sort of be everybody has their expertise and their value add, and you kind of put everybody together and push forward. And I think people like that. I like that. I think I learn the most when you kind of explain the rationale of the business behind why you're making decisions that you're doing, so that people don't feel like they're being whipsawed, and they understand it, and then they're not so angry about why you're doing. Oh, I get it now, why you have to make that choice. Obviously you can't tell everybody everything, but within reason, I think it brings stability, and people like that. They learn. That's how I learned at Agios. I got to see it, and it taught me all the things that I've learned and helped me build this company. And hopefully that is something that people who work at Auron can take forward in their career as they develop.
Absolutely. It's kind of like the why behind the what, and it's like important too. And I think too, is kind of like, for me, I very much like have a similar like approach, and that transparency. It's like, we're all adults here. Like, sometimes it's hard. Like, this is a hard problem that I am struggling with. And they can handle it. Like,
they can handle it.
Yeah, you don't need to patronize them, and they can handle it. And I think that helps, like, because when you leave anyone in the dark, it's like, that's where the kind of anxiety starts brewing.
Imaginations run wild about
it runs wild. And you can't stop that. So the only way, like, you got to just like be forthcoming about whatever it is, insert like thing that you want to be talking about. So I definitely agree with that. And as you're building this company, it sounds like you secured that first institutional kind of round of capital after kind of doing the kind of the more lean and mean kind of like proof of concepts. Can you talk about like what's your philosophy on fundraising? I know the past few years has been tough. How did you navigate that? And like any unconventional tips for anyone out there that is who's hitting the fundraising road?
Yeah, I think it is definitely tough out there right now. I think, feels like we're constantly fundraising, but it's just the nature of the beast at the moment. But I think for us, our North Star is just, if you do good science, I think the rest will come behind you. And so we make tough decisions. We look at things. We don't just keep going down rabbit holes. If it's not working, it's not working. Move on. And if it's working, keep going, right? And again, being transparent with the board and sort of showing them, the progress that we're making. And we've just kept that North Star of do good science, and the rest will build itself around you.
Absolutely. And I guess I have like two follow-up questions to that. You mentioned the board, like, being the CEO, you're probably interfacing with the board a lot. Yep. Like, and then you're probably, how do you effectively design your board, and how do you run a effective board meeting?
Yeah.
I have my approach, but I have a very small board. And, I think a lot of founders out there just like don't know what they're like. It's a learned skill.
And I'm learning it. Like, look, I got to this place. I didn't come from being in boardrooms. I'm learning that as I go, and I'm fortunate enough to have a team of people around me that are willing to help me and help me progress and grow as a CEO. And I think, the trust that I built with them is through being able to do the science, keep the budget under control, keep them informed, get their opinions, being able to raise capital in this tough environment, even if it's not, the gazillions of dollars that some people bring in, it's what we need to keep moving forward. And I think we meet our goals, and if we're not, we talk. But I think what we set out to do when I did my first seed financing, we have done. And I think I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the team, and I'm very grateful to the support that the board has given me.
Absolutely. And I think something that stood out to me as you were describing that is like, it's okay to also, to your board too, say when it's like something isn't working.
Exactly.
It's more scary. It's more,
Yeah.
it's a scarier conversation, but at least I think I think about my board meetings that were most kind of productive have been where it's like, let's problem solve here. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is like tough.
Yeah. This is
hard.
Yeah. And I think someone once told me, you never want to surprise your board with anything. And I think that's good advice.
Yeah. That is great advice. Like, do not. And, when it comes to, your fundraising kind of like, experience and journey, how do you approach like investor like selection? Like how did you choose the folks to be in your corner?
Yeah, I think so a lot of it is through connections and who people know and their networks, right? And so when we go out and fundraise, a lot of it's members that the board have, brought forward that they know in different funds, people that they like to co-invest with, through, some, academic folks too. We gain access to financing. We have a IR firm that we use that helps as well. Bankers, they help too. So, we tap into all the different channels. I mean, it is definitely hard right now. I think a lot. It's just a crazy market, and hopefully things will turn. But I think you just can't get discouraged. You just have to keep going. And when I feel discouraged or, frustrated or, tired, I just keep thinking like, okay, the science is really real here. I'm really excited by this. We have something. We just have to keep pushing. And we do. And again, like the true North Star of all of this is that I want to make better drugs for patients. I want to try and find things that are not making people deathly ill and, giving you, incremental changes in your quality of life or length of life. This is something, it's a nut we can crack if we figure out how to do it together.
Absolutely. And I think a couple of things that, directions is that it's like this aspect is just like, there's it's not sexy. It's just grit.
Yeah,
like
grit. Yeah.
It is just like, you have to be gritty, like super gritty. And, with your North Star of thinking about the patients, it makes that grit. It comes from within.
Yeah.
It kind of like you get out of bed and you're like, I'm not going to quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you don't have that North Star, it's like pretty easy to just like throw in the towel.
Yeah.
Like, screw it. I'm too tired. I'm like, but I love how like that is like the guiding factor there. And also too, it comes back to like knowing people, like knowing
using
people.
Your network, your network. Cause my son, I told you he's about to graduate college, and I think they're learning that this is how life works, right? It's, like I said, you can go to the fanciest schools and be wherever, and that helps for sure. But why does it help? Because it helps, build your network, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
And so you just have to capitalize on all of this.
Yeah. And I think too about like the one thing that I think as a scientist, when I was like first learning, I was like, ew, networking is kind of icky. Like, but you can do it in a not icky way.
Yeah, exactly.
You can definitely just like, and it's more of just like, I always think about it as like it's like a friendship.
Yeah, exactly.
It's making friends,
exactly.
Make friends and like be like authentically curious and interested. And that's ultimately what I think, or at least my kind of approach to making connections with people, is just like be curious. And even that, like, when you talked about your lab experience, and your PI coming onto the SAB,
Yeah.
it's just like you just had a great working relationship. I'm sure like a friendship too, and just like it's phone a friend. It's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it's like you want to be able to like phone that friend, and you want them to be able to pick up, and if you like have an authentic friendship, that they're going to pick up the phone and
Yeah.
with phone and make that do that back channel like cosign of Agios. But as we're looking forward, 1 year, 2 years, what's in store for you and Auron?
Yeah. Well, we're about to enter the clinic with our first molecule. So in the next, couple of months, which is super exciting. I think I'm really excited to show proof of concept of this whole hypothesis that, what we've done is really a way to treat cancer. So that's the data that we'll be generating over the next year, 18 months. And then I think really exciting to think about how to expand outside of oncology again, and really tapping into this platform and this type of biology, and see how we might have effects other places as well. And so, I hope we are able to move quickly and really bring in, the team and the people and provide good drugs for patients.
That's amazing. I'm pumped for you guys, like super pumped. And it's a very like, it's like I something that you said that really stood out to me. It was just like we're not just trying to just do like these incremental improvements. Like what?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of, I guess for lack of a better like phrase, is like go big or go home. Like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
like
And
what are
that's
we doing
the
this
grit.
for?
Yeah, you do. That's the grit, and you just put your ego aside and one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward. And you have to think about we've been doing drug discovery and cancer research for many, 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 many years, and people have been targeting the same things over and over and over again in just different modalities, but it's not moving the needle. And so, you can bang your head against the wall over and over again, but it's, at some point you got to just kind of, all right, let's try a different path. And it may not be right, but at least it's another shot. And I actually think it's not to say that the paths that have been forged are wrong. I think there's a potential to synergize with, in interesting other avenues as well. So, cancer is a very complex disease, and you need to attack it from multiple fronts. And so this is just one other front that we're starting to chart forward. And I look forward to getting that into the clinic, and then thinking about how we can work together with other therapies and give better improvements and better lives for patients.
That's amazing. And Kate, you've been so generous with your time. I'm having a blast. Like I could keep going, but I realize I should not be taking over your whole Friday. But thank you. I've learned a lot. I'm having a blast. And in traditional closing fashion, we have 2 questions. First question is, would you like to give any shout outs to anyone that supported you throughout your career?
Well, I think I have many people to thank for my career. I think Mike Carey for my Ph.D., Charles Sawyers for my postdoc, David Schenkein from my work at Agios. I think all of them have been really true mentors to me as I've moved through my career.
Awesome. And this is kind of a funny question. Is your husband still in school?
No, thank goodness.
Yeah.
With 38, I told him it was time he got a big boy job. He's finally finished his training. Yeah, he's a surgeon at Children's Hospital.
Yeah, he's like, okay, thank God. Like, you can't be doing this forever. You can't be doing this forever.
And I told him one of us has to have a stable job. Biotech is too crazy.
Yeah, it's too crazy. I need this like kind of base layer. I need you to just like beat this rock. Absolutely. And if you can give any advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
I think it would be, just believe in yourself and stick to your guns and, network and don't be afraid to take risks.
Absolutely. And I think for anyone who's out there and, as you're kind of like, we were talking about that existential dread of like, what's next. I think that's a tip that, anyone can find value from. And I think something that I've learned from you is about like just seizing the opportunity to get experience and learn is so critically important. And because like you really did have this soup to nuts kind of like experience.
Yes.
Small company, big company, basic research, drug discovery, clinical work. And it's like, you can read it in a book, but there's nothing that replaces just like getting your hands dirty. Like you built a vivarium, like
exactly.
Yeah, and both like figuratively and literally hands dirty. And so like I think it's that aspect is like I learned a lot. And perhaps I should have been more courageous on my side. Maybe leaving Berkeley would have been good. That would be the first step, is in courage. But Kate, thank you so much. I could do this for hours and hours and hours, but you've been so generous, and hopefully I get to see you soon. I know you're not going to JPM this year, but maybe on the next go around, we can get a cup of coffee.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation, and really look forward to getting a chance to meet you in person. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate.
That's all for this episode of the Biotech Startups podcast. We hope you enjoyed part 2 of our conversation with Kate Yen. If you did, consider subscribing, leaving us a review, and sharing it with your friends. Be sure to join us for our next series, featuring Becky Beatty, CEO at Launch Bio. Launch Bio is a non-profit dedicated to supporting high-growth life science companies. Through its national network of life science hubs, it builds an inclusive and collaborative ecosystem that drives industry growth. By connecting entrepreneurs with knowledge, capital, and talent, Launch Bio fosters innovation to advance human health. As CEO of Launch Bio, Becky leverages over 20 years of life sciences experience, blending molecular biology and business experience to drive impact. Since 2017, she has expanded Launch Bio's national presence and established the highly successful Investor Connect series, the Next Gen VC Forum and podcast, and Biotech Career Workshop STEM education program for high school students. Becky has also fostered collaborative relationships with ecosystem partners that include accelerators, universities, investors, and industry leaders. With a wealth of industry experience, a history of driving biotech innovation, and a passion for building highly inclusive, high-impact ecosystems, Becky offers valuable insights you won't want to miss. The Biotech Startups podcast is produced by Exceeder. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exceeder.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeder or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeder or its guests.